I've gone through my fair share of challenges in life, working in fast food, working at Walmart, being hospitalized, being poor after my foolish decision to be hospitalized. But by far, the most daunting challenge I've ever faced is getting my friends to watch or read my favorite series of all time, One Piece. But this was a challenge I took on with pride and determination. One Piece is a great story and there'll be better people for seeing it, I'm certain. I wasn't fazed when they didn't touch the anime. Neither the subs nor the Funimation dub were appealing to them due to the sheer length of the series, especially after hearing my complaints about the terrible pacing in which they stretched out every scene to be unbearably long to keep pace with the manga releases. I knew I'd need to look into other options. Next was the manga, though that was hard for them to get into as well, despite it being faster to consume. Reading, even if it's a manga, is just harder than watching a show. Getting more desperate, I tried a fan cut of the anime known as One Piece. I thought I had struck gold, but alas, the project was incomplete, and switching between the original series is slower paced, and the fan cut became too much of a hassle, and again took too much time. I even made my own fan cut of the Funimation dub, covering from the beginning until the end of the Water 7 saga, using my decade of experience as an editor to make cuts that didn't interrupt the flow of the show at all. I could even work around the background music without the viewer noticing anything. It was pretty cool. While it wasn't perfect, I wondered if this might be enough to hook my friends on One Piece enough to pick up with one pace with Thriller Bark. But then, tragedy struck. My friend turned to me on the couch and said, "Colleen Clinkenbeard's portrayal of Luffy, while admirable and professional, is grating on my ears, and I must cease my participation in the watching of this dub." I had lost the war. One Piece's inaccessibility had beaten me. The only thing I could do was just salvage what I could. My friends, still willing to give One Piece a chance after happening upon some of its best scenes, said they would at some point read the officially colored version of the manga that I could provide to them. But we all knew in our heart of hearts that this was a half measure. While officially colored by Shueisha to a stunningly accurate degree, it was never officially released by Viz in America. Some versions of it had a fan translation put on it, which was shoddy at best, and some versions had the official translations fitted onto them. Though it honestly wasn't much better, since Viz didn't hire a truly good translator to helm the series until volume 65, Stephen Paul. Plus, it was a manga, which again was more difficult for them to want to sit down and take in. And whilst I dream of a day when I can gather enough resources to put my own version of a correctly translated color manga together, I knew I had reached the end of my rope. I had to conclude that nothing short of a miracle would make One Piece accessible to a new American audience. But then... No, I am not touching that one yet. I have very good reasons to be skeptical of that. But in 2019, something happened. I saw a light glimmering far away. But I could see it through the well of deep darkness around me. One single, glimmering hope that One Piece would get to shine. And it was. Okay, that kind of ruined the reveal. It was supposed to be the Wano arc in the anime. The Wano arc was the Light of Hope thing. Out of seemingly nowhere, the anime now had amazing animation, wonderful stylization, and one of the single best episodes of anime I'd ever seen due to its stunning art direction. One Piece fans, after trudging through years of poorly drawn, dragged out, and slow episodes, now had some of the absolute best dragged out and slow episodes of any anime ever. It was clear something had changed, and even among those who didn't watch One Piece, people were taking notice. Suddenly, I'm seeing more and more people jumping into One Piece headfirst, swimming hard against the tide of poor production just to get a taste of the amazing show that suddenly appeared before them. Toei, the animation company behind One Piece, clearly made a huge change. They brought on a new series director, Tatsuya Nagamine, and hired some genius directors like Megumi Ichitani, and even hired animators from the West to work on the show as well. No one was quite sure of what happened, but everyone who wasn't being weirdly nitpicky gladly accepted it and became eager for more. I count myself among those fans who are ecstatic about the change in the anime, but something started bugging me. It sat on the back of my mind for months, years even, keeping me up at night. Why was this change made so suddenly? I learned throughout my years as a fan that Toei Animation and the publisher Shueisha and the TV network Fuji TV had no incentive to bring the anime to a higher quality. They never took on a seasonal structure to improve the quality in the episodes because they stood to make more money by putting out a lower quality episode each week of the year. They still release new episodes weekly, except when major disturbances outside of their control happen, but they have no incentive to put this many resources towards making the anime so great when they could get away with a lot less and make just as much money. In my cynical mind, something wasn't adding up. and this ate away at me. It could be that the new director and teams are so passionate that they are willing to push themselves beyond what they typically would, even despite the animators for these companies being continuously overworked and underpaid. But that seems unlikely, especially since they're hiring animators from abroad. So what was it? Why would Toei Animation and Fuji TV make this decision to give additional resources to their show if they had nothing to gain? And then it clicked. I turned that question on its head and suddenly it made sense. What if they did have something to gain? Immediately, I rushed to my computer and searched for the interview I needed for confirmation. An interview Eiichiro Oda had done with a Japanese YouTube show. And it was from 2019, the same year that the anime had transitioned to the Wano arc. And in the translated article, I found the question. Considering the entirety of One Piece, how many years does the story have left? I want to end it in 5 years. And there it was. Oda had told the world for the first time that he intends to end his magnum opus in about 5 years' time. Until this point, the most recent estimate given for the end of One Piece was in 2014, when he said he would end it in 10 years. Although it's been a common trend that Oda kept pushing off the date of One Piece. But did he? Looking back at a timeline of interviews, all of Oda's estimations are roughly consistent. Aside from his initial plans for the series to run only 5 years total, all modern interviews with Oda reflect the story would be roughly 115 to 120 volumes long and end sometime near 2024, give or take a year or two. Knowing he would be having talks like this with the publishers at Jump and Shueisha before announcing them to the public, the companies behind publishing One Piece realized that their cash cow series would end roughly sometime around the year 2024. One Piece is huge in Japan, like insanely huge. It's been described as the same level of the Simpsons mania in the 90s, or to use a more modern example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe at its peak, in terms of how big of a nationwide franchise it is. It's a household name in Japan, everyone knows of it, and it would be hard to go to any kind of merchandise store and not find any One Piece products. It's been near the top of the list for the highest grossing media franchises in Japan for a good 20 years. Its value to these companies is almost impossible to match. So clearly, if they have so much money riding on this one series helmed by this one mangaka, they want to have a 5-year plan in place for how they'll handle the franchise. And now that the end of the series has breached that 5-year plan, that's going to rock some boats. Undoubtedly, 2018 to 2019 was the time to start thinking of what they would do in a post-One Piece world. And clearly part of their plan was to take the anime in a new direction. Something about them reaching the end of the series made them start to take the anime adaptation more seriously. Why would that be? And I'm sure you know what the point I'm coming to is, it's the title of the video. Clearly, if Toei and Fuji TV and Shueisha want to keep making money after Oda ends his story, they're going to need to provide some new product to satiate fans. And they're not dumb, they know the fans didn't like the quality of the anime. And I don't think anyone wouldn't jump at the chance to see their favorite series animated beautifully and at a proper pace. Heck, Dragon Ball Kai didn't even get reanimated, and yet the pacing alone was enough to keep the franchise alive and strong, at least here in the West. Reanimating the series and airing it again would mean a consistent new source of money for the One Piece franchise for still more years to come. And as to how I came to this conclusion from the new direction for Wano, I believe the reason they're now putting so much effort into it is this. Realizing they would need to reanimate the entire series for a remake, they opted to save on some resources by having everything from Wano and beyond be animated to the new standards, so they would not have to reanimate that part once they reached it a second time through. All they would need to do once they finished reanimating Whole Cake Island and Reverie would be to cut the rest to a more reasonable pace. In fact, take a look for yourself and you may notice that during the Wano arc, there's a trend where a lot of the more important shots that aren't used to pad out the show tend to be animated super well, while the reaction shots and the side characters standing around tend to be a lot more stiff. Wano itself could have just been a proof of concept, a test by Toei to see if increasing resources for the animation of their hit show would be worthwhile. And I think the conclusion they'll come to is an absolute yes. I think Wano's already paying dividends. I'm noticing One Piece becoming more popular in the West in the past few years, and I think we have Wano to thank. In fact, the fact that One Piece is becoming popular in the West is one of the greatest examples of why this is worthwhile for Toei. They kinda shot themselves in the foot with One Piece's international release, shoving the anime onto a dubbing company that clearly wasn't producing for One Piece's demographic. Since then, One Piece has limped forward in the West with very little chance to bring in new viewers aside from rabid fan recommendations. Lastly, I think it's important to talk about the single biggest flaw in my theory. In Japan, there's something of an honor code that shows have in regards to their voice actors, or seiyuu as they're called. Typically, recasting voice actors is a very rare occurrence. Oftentimes, seiyuu are unquestionably recast for their old characters, even if their voices have shifted enough with age to not fit the character anymore. If a seiyuu for a character passes away, you'd probably see the character be retired more often than recast. Understanding this, and the fact that the voice of Luffy, Mayumi Tanaka, is turning 68 years old, makes me realize that reanimating One Piece in its entirety and keeping her on as the voice of Luffy seems unlikely. One Piece's current anime will probably run for another 5 years. If it were then to be reanimated, even at a rate of a major saga being covered each year at a good pace, it would still take roughly 11 to 12 years to air One Piece again. By that supposed time, Mayumi Tanaka would be 85 years old. So it's worth understanding that this show may not get a reboot simply because of that. For an industry that seldom accommodates its workers, the animation companies from Japan are admirable for staying so loyal to their voice actors. And if this is a major contributing reason to disprove my theory, I wouldn't be upset. The cynical part of me has to wonder, though, if this will be what happens to Toei's cash cow. I remember seeing an article a few years ago with a headline about Mayumi Tanaka talking about being recast as Luffy. I was clickbaited, thinking she was being recast in the near future, but the article was actually about Tanaka discussing there coming a point where she may not be able to voice Luffy, and her asking her fans to accept that she needs to be recast if that day ever comes. And so that cynic in me now has to wonder, will we see an increasing number of interviews from the older seiyuu of the Straw Hats mentioning that they'd be okay with being recast if the need arose? The aging seiyuu problem may hold this project back, but it also might not. I still believe Toei will want to continue One Piece as long as they can with the original voice cast regardless. But this was my conclusion. More than that, this was my dream for One Piece. This dream won't leave my head until I see a new dawn for anime or get proven wrong by a reality devoid of any justice. This is my idealism on full display, and I'm putting my hope out to the world. I want this hope to stay with One Piece fans, that one day, probably only a few months after the anime finishes adapting the end of one of the greatest mangas of all time, we'll hear an announcement that a remake of the One Piece anime will begin. And it will faithfully adapt and even elevate the source material, bringing new and old fans alike together in harmony, ending all war, world hunger, and even social media discourse, so that we may all sit together and watch a show about a funky rubber boy becoming king of the pirates. That's what lies at the end of my dream, for all One Piece fans and potential One Piece fans alike. Maybe it's wishful thinking. Maybe it's a well-reasoned, cynical insight into the thoughts of executives just trying to make their franchise as much money as they can get. But either way, both lead to a strong hope that one day I can sit down with my friends, watching a new episode of One Piece, laughing and having a good time as we share some drinks. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be extremely grateful if you left a like. Maybe you might enjoy another video with my thoughts on One Piece, and like Luffy always says, may the Force be with you.